Haddon Kelly collapsed at school and passed away. And now, his family awaits an autopsy to see what happened to him. Dodge County High School is mourning the loss of a 17-year-old junior who died Monday morning. Smith, the coroner who said Kelly was his nephew, confirmed he collapsed around 8:30 or 9 a.m. while with his friends who were rolling a home. A prank also known as T-Ping, where toilet paper is tossed into trees and across yards. A friend found him unresponsive. An autopsy is scheduled in Atlanta. The death comes during Dodge County High School's homecoming week.
The Dodge County High School community is mourning the loss of a student who collapsed and died Monday. Dodge County Coroner Joe Smith says his nephew, Haddon Kelly, was participating in homecoming activities when he suddenly collapsed. He was taken to Dodge County Hospital where he was pronounced dead. Smith said Kelly was kind, outgoing, and an excellent golfer. An autopsy will be performed to determine how the young man died.
Dodge County High School announced Kelly's death in a Facebook post. There are no words to express the sadness that our DCHS family feels for the loss of Junior. Please join us in prayer for his family, friends, and our DCHS family. Gone from our sight, but never from our hearts. Dodge County Schools also shared condolences. Our hearts are broken. Please keep Hayden's family and friends in your prayers during this extreme, difficult time. What made a healthy high school teenager just collapse?
Well, I think probably what's referred to as the gross dissection, which is where you have the remains in front of you. You do an external and an internal examination, and we refer to it as examining the body with the unaided eye, okay? And what that means is there any kind of diagnoses that the forensic pathologist can come up with? Like if they're taking a look at the heart, they would look at the valves in the heart, particularly with a young person, to see if there's any kind of malformation in the valves, wanting to know also things like, is the heart muscle atrophied in any way, kind of worn and weak? Is there wall thickening in the heart? That's a sign of hypertension many times. And of course, they're going to look for standard things like heart disease. You begin to think of a 17-year-old with heart disease. In my wildest dreams, I've been trying to think about this. Is he predisposed to some kind of genetic anomaly? And it's all going to center around the heart, I think probably around the brain as well. But that examination is not going to be complete until they can take those tissue samples that they recover at autopsy. Remember how I said with the unaided eye, and what they will do is they will fix those samples, place them onto a microscopic slide, and it's a histological examination. And the pathologist will actually sit in a microscope and take a look through the scope at the tissues as well. You'll have extensive tissue sampling throughout the body to try to understand this and to try to appreciate, is there something that has been missed developmentally? Because he's 17, Jesse. He's not that far removed from mom taking him to the pediatrician. Were there any indications early on? Is there something that they may have missed? One of the first things that came to mind for me, because he's kind of long and lean, I was thinking, well, is this kid suffering from Marfan syndrome, which is something we see with people that are really tall. They even think that, Abraham Lincoln may have had Marfan's. You get heart anomalies with that. And there's certain physical characteristics that you see, particularly with the fingers. And there are heart abnormalities that are associated with that. And I don't know that that's the case, but everything is going to be explored here. I think one of my big questions, I've heard a couple of things here that as far as the timeline goes, that are kind of interesting. I'd read one report where they said that he was deceased at the scene and found by a friend. And then the other was that he was removed from the scene and taken to the emergency room and pronounced there.
I saw that mixed reporting too, yeah.
Yeah, and I want to understand that timeline because, Jesse, that's very important when you're talking about something where you don't have obvious trauma. You have to understand what was going on with him. And also, when they found him, I want to know, was he just not breathing? Were there any color changes in his body? And the reason I say that, there's one obvious thing that you can kind of look at and see if somebody is in what's referred to as congestive failure. It essentially goes from like the nipple line up to the top of the head. People will actually take on kind of a dark purplish color, and that's an indication of congestive failure. You've got a problem with your heart, your lungs. You're not processing like you should be. So there's so much here to explore. And as a death investigator, I got to tell you, I'm going to be asking some very specific questions. I want to know what what he had ingested that morning, because 17-year-olds just don't fall over deceased. We hear about them in the news. Do you know why we hear about them? It's the same reason we're talking right now. It just doesn't happen. That's what puts it on the radar. It's such an anomaly. I want to know if he's taken on any kind of supplements in the morning. I want to know if maybe he's on an energy drink. That could play into it. You never know. 9 o'clock in the morning, you're running around the neighborhood, you're TPing houses and this sort of thing. You're with your buddies. Anything that he might have had in his system, of course, that's all going to come back relative to toxicology.
And they will also be looking, I imagine, for allergies and toxins as well. I imagine if that's so clear to determine, based either on toxicology reports or a preliminary examination.
Yeah, it would be. Well, first off, you got to go back in time relative to this young man's history. I kind of, talked about that a little bit. Had he been followed for his entire life by a physician developmentally? Was there anything? And also, I think important to try to understand is over the past few weeks, has anything changed relative to his appetite, his activity? This kid is really into golf. So if you've got let's just say he's become lethargic or kind of listless. He's complained of being tired, for instance, or fatigued. Did any of that symptomology precede now, what we're seeing now? That's an important question to ask. Has his diet changed at all? And, there are those outlier things too that I'm still, because it's a death investigation. I'm going to want to know if he had ingested something. Did anybody have access to anything he was drinking or anything he was eating? That's all on the table at this point. You have to consider this.
How expansive does a death investigation go? Would your job be looking at interviews or interviewing people that were around him that day, days leading up? Would it be looking at surveillance footage? I mean, how extensive does it go?
Oh, my Lord. Yeah, it's going to be dense. Particularly the data is going to be dense, particularly in a case like this, because you're, when you and I cover cases that are involving very specific trauma, Jesse, we got some pretty obvious answers there. You're literally starting out with bupkis here. You don't have anything as far as detailed physical information or medical information about lifestyle and all those things. So you're having to build out a case. And I'm not talking about from a police standpoint. I'm talking about from my community as the medical legal authorities. You mentioned his great uncle is the coroner. Well, he's part of that machinery, as far as involving himself in the death investigation. You're going to go back, you're going to go to his treating physicians, if he has a family physician that he's been visiting. I'm sure with every single kid that I'm aware of that is going into a sport, okay, you have to have a medical examination. What was found there? Is it something that they were doing every single year? And what did that consist of? I'm going to interview all of his friends, particularly those that were either traveling in a vehicle with him, that had spent time with him that morning. Of course, you got to go back to the parents. A real fantastic snapshot is the last 24 hours before he was found unconscious or deceased in that yard. I want to know what was going on with him prior to all of that. What had occurred relative to interactions with people, complaints of illness, those sorts of things. All that stuff's going to have to be unpacked. And this is going to be a very involved investigation.
When will the public, and more importantly, when will his family get answers as to what happened?
It's going to be a slow rollout with talks unless they can talk to the GBI, who would be handling this case, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, because the state medical examiner is housed within that organization. If they can get like toxicology bumped up to the front of the line, because everybody's going to be curious about that. If they are not seeing anything with the unaided eye and they're just kind of going into this investigation, wanting to know what was going on at a chemical level, were there any toxins, were there any drugs? You talked about allergies. I think that's going to be very important. Allergic reactions, things of this nature. They're going to have to consider every bit of that data. And this case in particular, it would not surprise me, Jesse, to see them get maybe a cardiologist involved in it, as a consult, to have them take a look at the heart. Also, perhaps a neuropathologist, if they suspect anything was going on with the brain, they'll bring in that consultation because they want to make sure that all the boxes are ticked here. Because you get one shot at it. You get one shot at, doing it right the first time, and that's it. And so they're going to cover a lot of territory with this.
Before we wrap things up, a little inside baseball. So I helped to write a lot of these episodes for Sidebar. I wrote today's, and as I was writing it, I barely could find information about this. There were like a few articles, they were repeating a lot of the same information, bare bones information. Is it strange to you we don't have a lot of information right now? No indication about what happened? It's like this was a beloved athlete. He was doing a prank. He's dead. Well, that's all we know. Like, there's no further explanation. Is that strange to you?
Not necessarily. However, I think that it has to grab the appetite of the media in particular. The closest large city to this location is essentially Macon. You go down to Macon, Georgia, and they've got multiple news outlets there. There's a pretty prominent newspaper there, I think the Macon Telegraph. I would keep my eye on those news feeds to see if this elicits any kind of reaction from the news media there in that area, because they could really do a deep dive. And I think it's really important because, look, we've got a 17-year-old high school student, Jesse, that is deceased. I think that that's valuable information to try to understand and educate the public about what's going on here, because I don't know if I'm a parent, and we've got a very healthy, robust young man that is now passed on. I want to know, is there anything I need to be worried about relative to the safety of my child, just trying to understand behaviors that were going on. They're all associated with this. Yeah, there's kind of a silence right here, right now. I would think that reporters that occupy that space down there in middle Georgia, that they would really get on the phone and get on the street, go out there and ask questions, talk to the kids that he went to school with, talk to the teachers, talk to the coaches, and really ask the GBI the direct questions, as well as his uncle, the coroner's office in Dodge County, Georgia.
Well, I just hope that whoever is investigating this and analyzing this is as thorough and well-researched and experienced as you, because you are a gem, Joseph.